Why was everyone laughing, and why didn't she say a word? The wind rolled over the flat, sun-bleached field of Fort Brack, carrying with it the dry scent of sand and gun oil. A group of recruits stood in a crooked line behind the firing benches, their laughter sharp and nervous, cutting through the late morning heat. Somewhere among them stood a woman who didn't quite fit the picture they'd painted of a soldier. "Hey, sweetheart," one of them called out, his tone dripping with mock kindness. "Maybe let me show you how to hold that thing before you hurt yourself." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel in the loud way bullies usually are. It was quieter, uneasy, like everyone knew the joke had gone too far but no one wanted to be the one to stop it. Ilara didn't respond. She didn't even blink. Her pale blue eyes stayed fixed on the steel target shimmering 1,000 meters away. Her hands rested with deliberate calm on the M2010 sniper rifle in front of her, steady, sure, almost gentle. To most eyes, she looked fragile. Her frame was small, her uniform loose enough to make her look lost inside it. Her hair, a soft brown, was pulled into a simple knot. Nothing about her screamed sharpshooter. Nothing about her screamed anything at all. And that silence was the problem. Sergeant Miller, the instructor, watched her with a smirk that never quite reached his eyes. He was a man who mistook volume for authority, sarcasm for strength. His voice had the weight of someone used to being listened to, even when he had nothing worth saying. "All right, people," he barked, striding past them, boots crunching on the gravel. "This is not the time for sightseeing. Today's exercise is the king's shot. Maximum distance. One bullet, no second chances." He turned, pausing for effect, letting the recruits hang on his words. "It's what separates the shooters from the show-offs." Then his eyes landed back on her, the quiet one. "And some of you," he added loudly, "from the administration experiments." Laughter erupted again, louder this time. He'd given them permission. Ilara didn't flinch. She inhaled slowly, the kind of breath a trained mind takes before cutting through chaos. The air filled her lungs, then left them in a slow, measured stream. In that quiet rhythm she found her balance. To her there was no noise, no wind, no voices, no insults. Only distance. Only variables, wind velocity, humidity, temperature, the subtle curve of the earth itself. Everything else was irrelevant. Miller clapped his hands once. "All right, I'll go first. Watch and learn." He dropped to the mat with a theatrical grunt, like a performer stepping on stage. His spotter crouched beside him. Miller called out instructions, correcting details no one had asked for. He spoke loud enough for everyone to hear because silence made him uneasy. He fired. The sound tore through the air, sharp, confident, practiced. Seconds later, a voice crackled over the range radio. "Impact 9 o'clock, just outside center." "A decent shot." "Good, even. But not perfect." Miller stood up, dusting his uniform with a grin. "That's precision under pressure, ladies and gentlemen," he announced. "That's what experience looks like." Then he turned toward her. "Ilara," he said, dragging her name out like an afterthought. "Your turn. Try not to embarrass yourself, or us." A few recruits chuckled. Others looked away, the kind of silence that feels like complicity. Ilara stepped forward, each movement deliberate. She knelt, then lay flat on the mat, her rifle an extension of her body. The air seemed to still around her. No bravado, no words, just focus. From the corner of his mouth, Miller muttered, "Bet she misses the whole damn target." But then something shifted. The observers saw it, subtle, almost imperceptible. The way her shoulders aligned perfectly with the rifle stock, how her breathing fell into sync with her heartbeat. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation. It was like watching a shadow find its place in the light. She closed her eyes, not to block out the world, but to feel it. The slight breeze brushing across her cheek told her more than any instrument could. She adjusted the turret 2 clicks left, exhaled halfway. Then, in the heartbeat between breaths, she pulled the trigger. The recoil nudged her shoulder, familiar, friendly. The report echoed across the field, then faded into stillness. Everyone waited. 1 second, 2, 5. Nothing. Then the radio crackled. The range officer's voice came through, flat, stunned. Direct hit center. A pause, then disbelief. Correction, the round went through the same hole as the last impact. The silence that followed was absolute, the kind of silence that rearranges the air itself. Alara blinked once, then calmly began unloading her rifle, every motion smooth, efficient, as if she'd done this 1,000 times before, which, in truth, she had. Miller's face went pale, his grin faltered, his jaw opened but no words came out. The recruit stood frozen, caught between awe and confusion. "That's impossible," Miller whispered. A figure in uniform, Colonel Warnes, had been standing off to the side, watching quietly. A man shaped by wars that didn't make headlines. His eyes, sharp and weathered, didn't miss much. He had seen arrogance meet truth before, but rarely this cleanly. He stepped forward, his boots echoing against the concrete. The recruits instinctively made space. "Sergeant," Warren said quietly, "get me the personnel file on this soldier." The order sliced through the air like a blade. The sergeant beside him hurried to obey, pulling up a tablet, tapping fast. Warnes didn't look away from Alara. She was cleaning her weapon, serene, methodical, like nothing extraordinary had happened. A moment later, the tablet was in his hand. He scanned it once, his brows tightened, then lifted. He looked up, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, his voice carried the gravity of revelation. "Unit Tier 1, Task Force Phantom." The words landed like thunder. A murmur rippled through the line of soldiers. Phantom, a name whispered in training halls and rumor mills, a unit that wasn't supposed to exist. Warnes continued. Over 80 classified operations, Silver Star, Distinguished Service Cross, Congressional Medal of Honor. He looked back at Miller, whose arrogance had completely drained into disbelief. "She's not here to be trained, Sergeant," Warnes said. "She's here to evaluate your instructors." The silence deepened. No one dared to breathe. Warnes turned to Alara. "It's an honor, ma'am." The word "ma'am," coming from a colonel to a supposed recruit, cracked something open in the air. The ground seemed to tilt. And for the first time all morning, Alara smiled. Barely, but enough. Miller just stood there, humiliated into humility, realizing that every insult he'd thrown had been aimed at a legend. A ghost. The woman standing in front of him wasn't a quota or an experiment. She was a weapon forged in silence. Word of the shot spread like wildfire through the base. By sundown, every barracks, every hallway, every online thread had the same headline: "The Silent Shooter." Some called her myth, others called her lucky, but those who'd been there knew better. They'd seen how she didn't need noise to command attention, how she didn't need anger to demand respect. And though no one could prove it, every soldier swore that for one brief second, when the wind died and the shot rang out, the world itself seemed to pause, to listen. That night Miller sat alone on the edge of his bunk, staring at the floor. The laughter from the morning echoed in his memory like a shameful drumbeat. He'd been so certain of himself, so loud. And in that silence, he finally understood what true precision sounded like. It wasn't just about hitting a target. It was about knowing when to pull the trigger and when to say nothing at all. Alara's record remained sealed. Her code name, Banzhe, was whispered but never written. Those who tried to ask found their questions redirected, their curiosity quietly discouraged. But in Fort Brack, her legend grew in the spaces between words. And somewhere deep in that legend was a truth only a few would ever grasp. That sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's dominance disguised as calm. What happens after silence destroys a man's certainty. The next morning Fort Brack looked the same. Same dust, Same rows of barracks glowing in the early sun, but something had changed. People walked slower near the range, whispering more quietly than usual, as if afraid the air still carried her name. Ilara, or rather the name behind the name, Banzhe. No one said it aloud, not yet, but everyone knew. Sergeant Miller arrived before dawn, uniform crisp, boots polished until they caught the first slivers of light. He hadn't slept much. The sound of that single shot kept replaying in his mind, clean, calm, absolute. It wasn't the sound itself that haunted him. It was what followed. The silence. That endless, merciless silence. He used to fill silence with noise, orders, jokes, insults, anything to remind himself he mattered. Now every word felt heavy, unearned. He watched from the control tower as Ilara walked across the range alone, carrying her rifle case in one hand, a small notebook in the other. There was nothing dramatic about her movements. She looked ordinary, and maybe that was what made her terrifying. She didn't walk like someone trying to be noticed. She walked like someone who didn't need to be. When she reached the benches, she set the rifle down with quiet reverence, checked every latch, every screw, every scope line. Then she sat back straight, eyes on the horizon. She wasn't waiting for anyone. She was simply being. Miller climbed down the tower ladder, each rung feeling heavier than the last. He hesitated before stepping onto the gravel beside her. "Ma'am," he started, the word catching awkwardly in his throat. "I wanted to say." She didn't look up. "You don't have to." "I do," his voice cracked. "I was wrong." Finally she turned toward him. Those pale blue eyes weren't angry. They weren't even distant. They were steady. That was somehow worse. She let him speak. No interruptions, no expression, just listening. "I thought I knew what makes a soldier," he said quietly. "I thought it was control, power, being the loudest voice in the room, but yesterday—" He swallowed hard. "Yesterday you didn't raise your voice once, and everyone listened." For a long time she said nothing. Then she closed the notebook, set it aside, and asked softly, "Do you know why I did?" He shook his head. "Because words can miss too," she said, "like bullets." The sentence hung between them, gentle, almost poetic, but it hit him harder than any reprimand. She stood, brushing the dust from her sleeves. "If you really want to make it right, stop teaching them to talk like soldiers. Teach them to think like one." And then she walked away, leaving him standing in the morning wind, holding nothing but the weight of understanding. That afternoon, the story of the shot reached command headquarters. Reports were rewritten, transferred, sanitized. Every mention of Banzhe was redacted. Officially, she didn't exist. Unofficially, her name was carved into the folklore of the base. Recruits began calling her Ghost. Others, the Quiet One. The myth grew faster than anyone could stop it. But legends are heavy to carry, especially for the ones still bleeding underneath. That night, Ilara sat alone in the maintenance shed, cleaning her weapon under a single flickering light. Each click of metal against metal echoed like a heartbeat. Outside, the wind hummed through the vents, a low, endless drone that reminded her of other places, other missions. Her fingers paused over the bolt. For a moment, she saw sand again. Not the soft beige of Brack's training fields, but the deep orange dust of a faraway desert, where the sun fell like fire, and the only sound louder than the wind was the cry that never left her throat. She blinked, it was gone. But the memory stayed, lurking beneath her calm. Every soldier carried ghosts. Hers just happened to have names. When Colonel Warnes entered the shed, he didn't announce himself. He knew better. Ilara noticed him anyway, through reflection in the scope glass. "Colonel," she said simply. He stopped a few feet away. "You're still awake." "I don't sleep much," she replied. "The quiet gets loud." Warnes nodded slowly. "You made an impression today, the kind that doesn't fade." "I didn't intend to." She reassembled the bolt with mechanical precision. That's what makes it powerful. His voice softened. You know, I've seen soldiers who bragged their way into history and vanished the next year. You say nothing and 10 men change their lives. Alara placed the rifle back into its case. I didn't change anyone. I just reminded them to listen. He smiled faintly. You'll find that's the hardest mission of all. She didn't answer. Her gaze drifted toward the far wall where old shooting targets hung like faded ghosts. One of them still bore yesterday's shot, the one perfect hole through another. It had been pinned there by the recruits, a silent shrine to the impossible. Warns followed her gaze. They're calling it the Banzhe Shot. Her jaw tightened slightly. That name should have stayed buried. It won't, he said. Not now, not after this. Alara sighed. Then make sure they remember what it means, not the myth, the lesson. And what's that? Warnes asked. That silence isn't weakness, she said quietly. It's discipline. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. You'll have that chance. Command wants you to stay for a while. Help train the next intake. Alara's eyes flicked to him, searching. You know I don't do classrooms. I'm not asking you to teach, he said. I'm asking you to show. Days turned into weeks. The range changed. Where Miller's voice used to dominate, it was now replaced by focus, by precision, by silence. Alara didn't give speeches. She didn't bark orders. She observed, corrected, demonstrated. Her students learned to breathe before they aimed, to wait before they fired, to feel before they acted. And for the first time in his career, Sergeant Miller found peace in being quiet. He watched the recruits with new eyes, saw fear not as weakness but as information, saw mistakes not as failure but as calibration. And in the middle of it all stood Alara, calm as the horizon, teaching without words. Sometimes she'd walk behind a trainee, kneel beside them and whisper, "Don't fight the wind. Let it guide you." Other times, she'd simply nod once, a silent approval that meant more than 100 shouted praises. The recruits adored her, not in the way soldiers admire a hero, but in the way humans recognize something sacred, control without cruelty, mastery without arrogance. But silence has a price. Late one evening, when the range was empty, Miller found her sitting by the fence, staring into the dark distance. He hesitated, then joined her. You ever miss it? Miss what? The noise, he said, the missions, the world that built you. She thought for a moment. Sometimes, but mostly I miss who I was before it. He frowned. Before what? Before the pause, before the flash, before the shot she never talks about. Her voice dropped low. There was a village once, hostage situation, bad intel, I made the shot, saved 6 lives, took one I wasn't meant to. Her fingers tightened around the dog tags hidden under her collar. That's what silence is made of, Sergeant, not peace, penalty. He didn't know what to say. Alara stood, brushing the dirt from her hands. That's why I train them, because maybe if they learn patience, one of them won't have to live with what I do. By the end of the month, the recruits completed their final exercise, a long-range test under harsh crosswinds. Every one of them passed. Colonel Warnes watched from the tower as Miller called out the last result. There was no shouting, no boasting, just quiet nods of approval, firm handshakes, and proud eyes. He turned to Alara, standing beside him. You changed this place. She shook her head. No, they changed themselves. I just reminded them how. Warren smiled. You sound like you almost believe in hope again. Alara didn't answer. Instead, she watched the wind dance across the field, tugging at the flags. For a moment, it almost sounded like applause. But deep inside, she knew this was temporary. Her orders would come soon. They always did. You can only stay still for so long when your life is made of movement. And when they came, those coded words, those sealed envelopes, she would go. Back into the silence that never truly left her. But not before leaving something behind. A new kind of soldier, One who listened. One who breathed before acting. One who understood that the quietest trigger pull can echo the longest. That night, as the barracks lights dimmed, Miller walked the empty hall toward his quarters. On the wall above the range entrance, he noticed something new, a framed target sealed behind glass. The hole was small, perfect, centered. Below it, a brass plate read only 3 words. The Banzhe Shot. He stopped, staring. For a moment he could almost hear her voice again, calm and distant. "Let your actions speak. The noise will fade." He whispered it back, softly like a prayer. By the time the next dawn broke over Fort Brack, the legend had already taken root. Recruits would arrive months later and ask, "Did she really do it?" One bullet through another. And the older ones would smile, shake their heads, and say, "It's not about the shot. It's about the silence after." Because sometimes the loudest truth isn't shouted. It's whispered, and it lasts forever. Why did the message arrive in silence? It was 300 hours when the wind changed. Alara felt it before she saw it, that subtle stillness before something happens. The kind she'd learned to read long before words ever told her anything. Outside her barracks, Fort Brack slept under a thin veil of fog. The floodlights painted the range in muted gold, and for a moment everything looked peaceful. Then the door creaked. A courier stood in the frame, face unreadable, a small sealed envelope in his gloved hand. No salute, no introduction, just a single sentence. "Orders, ma'am, eyes only." She took it, nodded once, and shut the door. The paper was heavy, too official for training, too discreet for paperwork. She slid it open with her knife, unfolded the single sheet inside. Black type, clean and cold. Classified deployment, Tier 1 Oversight Command. Op code Echo Fall. Objective, extraction/counter-sniper operation, Northern Azurin Province. Commence 400. Contact Phantom Command Shade. No signature. No briefing time. Just coordinates. Her heart didn't race. It never did anymore. But something deeper stirred a recognition. Azurin. She hadn't heard that name in years, the place where her silence began. She folded the paper neatly, slid it into her breast pocket, and began packing. Rifle, ammunition, dried rations, a single photograph, creased and faded, 6 silhouettes in desert uniforms, smiling under a pale Afghan sun. All of them gone now, all but her. By 400 she was airborne. The transport plane trembled through the night. Across from her sat a man she hadn't seen since the desert. His hair had gone gray at the edges, but his eyes were the same, dark, calculating, patient. "Shade," she said quietly. "Banzhe." He nodded, the hint of a grin ghosting his lips, still allergic to small talk. She tilted her head, still hiding in the dark. They shared the kind of half-smile only ghosts can manage. 2 soldiers defined by missions that never officially happened. He slid a tablet toward her. "Intel package, you'll want to see this." The screen flickered to life, satellite imagery of a valley carved between black cliffs, marked by the faint glint of metal. A name overlaid in white letters, Ravik Station. "Hostage compound," Shade said. "Mercenary group. Not locals, ex-mill contractors gone rogue. CIA thinks they're holding one of ours." "One of ours?" "Marine Recon," he confirmed. "Lieutenant Sarah Vale." Alara's gaze sharpened. "Vale, she trained under Miller." "Yeah, she's good, but she's running out of time." Shade's tone darkened. "We've had eyes on the compound for 48 hours, 2 sentries on the ridgeline, 1 on the tower, but that's not what worries me." He zoomed in. On a grainy frame stood a silhouette holding a rifle with long, spider-leg bipods. "That's a sniper nest," Alara said. "Correct," he said. "Whoever he is, he's good. Took out a recon drone at 1,500 meters." Her jaw tightened. "Coulson." Shade hesitated, then met her eyes. "Ghost wind." She blinked once, slowly. That name wasn't new, it was a scar. Thought he was dead, she said quietly. So did we. The hum of the engines filled the silence. Ghost Wind, a mercenary marksman trained years ago under the same Black Ops program that made her. A mirror, gone rogue. The only one who ever came close to matching her distant scores. Shade leaned forward. Command wants this clean. In and out. No media, no heroics. Get Vale out. Neutralize Ghost Wind if possible. If possible, she repeated. He met her stare. We both know he's not ordinary. Alara didn't answer. She didn't need to. Somewhere deep inside, she'd already accepted it. This mission wasn't about extraction. It was about reckoning. They landed before dawn on a makeshift strip carved into the edge of a mountain plateau. Cold air cut through her uniform, carrying the smell of frost and iron. A small forward unit greeted them, 2 operators from Phantom, both silent and efficient. No salutes, just nods. Command base is 2 clicks north, one of them said. You'll have 5 hours before the storm hits. Shade handed her a headset. We'll monitor from here. Once you go dark, comms stay one way. She adjusted the strap on her pack, checked the bolt on her rifle. Understood. Banzhe, Shade said quietly as she turned to leave. She paused. You sure about this? He asked. This isn't a test range anymore. Her eyes softened not with emotion but with memory. It never was. Then she vanished into the white mist. The valley stretched below like an open wound. From her perch on the ridge, Alara watched through the scope, every flicker of motion, every glint of light. The compound sat deep within the basin, a skeleton of concrete and rusted steel. She counted guards, mapped patrols, traced lines of sight. Her mind worked in layers, wind, angle, time. The rifle became an extension of breath, the scope a window into fate. Through it she saw him. The opposing sniper, Ghost Wind, nested 300 meters away on a mirrored ridge. He was patient, precise. His barrel barely moved as he scanned. He didn't know she was there yet, but he would. The 2 of them had shared the same instructors, the same drills, the same cold lessons whispered in dark rooms. Never chase noise, hunt the stillness. For a long time, she simply watched him. Then she whispered to herself, let's see if you still believe that. The first shot didn't come from her. It came from him, a warning round cutting the air near her position. Clean, precise, purposeful. He knew. She rolled left, exhaled, and sighted again. Through the scope she caught a brief flash, his reflection on glass. A mistake, a small one, but enough. She adjusted. Wind 4 mph east. Distance 1,480 meters. Drop compensation 9.7 inches. Exhale, half breath. Trigger squeeze. The round cut through the valley like thunder. Impact near his post, shattering rock, forcing him to move. He shifted fast, smart. He was good, very good. For 15 minutes, the 2 ghosts traded silence. Not bullets, but patience. Each waited for the other to blink. Finally, a whisper in her earpiece, Shade's voice low and urgent. Banzhe, movement inside compound, hostage relocating. She adjusted her scope, zooming in. 2 figures dragged a bound woman across the yard, Sarah Vale. Her head hung low, but she was alive. Alara's mind recalibrated instantly. The sniper duel wasn't the mission. She was. She whispered copy, going silent. Moving downhill through the snow was like slipping between worlds. Every step timed with the wind gusts, every breath synced with the sound of rusted metal below. She reached the outer fence, cut it clean, slid through. 2 guards by the main gate. She waited, counted heartbeats. When the 3rd heartbeat came, she fired twice. Suppressed shots. 2 bodies dropped quietly as if falling asleep. Inside, the air was heavy with oil and smoke. She followed the corridor until the world narrowed, metal doors, a dim bulb, and faint coughing from inside. Vale. Alara stepped in, knife ready. One captor sat slumped against the wall, dozing. Another stood near the prisoner. 2 seconds, 2 kills, no sound. She cut Vale's bindings, catching her before she fell. Easy, Alara whispered. You're safe. Vale blinked through exhaustion. Who are you? Doesn't matter. She pulled her to her feet. Can you walk? Yeah, I think so. Then stay behind me. They moved through the corridor toward the extraction point. Outside, the wind screamed across the cliffs. The storm was arriving early. Shade's voice returned in her ear. Extraction bird inbound, 2 minutes. Then a gunshot tore through the static. The wall beside her exploded in dust. She shoved Vale to cover, rolling behind a beam. Through the dust, she saw him ghost wind, rifle leveled, calm, deliberate. He had found her. The storm howled, masking their movements. Each one hunted the other through the blur of snow and steel. Alara moved low, shifting angles. He mirrored her, a dance between two reflections, predator and predator. Her breathing slowed. She remembered his habits, the way he double-checked wind before every shot, the half-second pause before pulling the trigger. That pause was his weakness. She waited for it. When it came, that subtle stillness, she fired. The bullet split the air, struck the rail beside him, deflecting into his shoulder. Not fatal, but enough to make him drop the rifle. She approached cautiously, gun raised. He sat against the wall, blood blooming through his sleeve, smirking through pain. Still the best, he said, voice rough but almost fond. Didn't think you'd come yourself. Wasn't supposed to be personal, she said. It always is with us. He looked up, eyes glassy but defiant. You remember what they called us, the twins of silence. She hesitated. They trained us to kill echoes, he whispered. Now look at us, the last ones left. For a moment, neither spoke. Snow hissed against the metal roof above, drowning out everything but memory. Then he coughed, blood pooling at his lips. Do it. She shook her head. No. He smiled faintly. You still think mercy changes the ending? I think it changes me, she said. And with that she turned away, pulling Vale toward the exit. Behind them, ghost wind laughed, once soft, hollow. Then the storm took him. The helicopter's rotors ripped the night apart as Alara and Vale lifted off the valley floor. Below, Ravik Station burned not from explosions, but from its own collapsing structure, swallowed by snow and flame. Shade's voice crackled through the comms. Package secured, casualties. None, Alara said. Then, after a pause, almost. She leaned back, eyes closing, the drone of the engines washing over her. The storm blurred into white nothingness beneath them, a clean slate the world would never know existed. Vale sat across from her, watching quietly. You didn't have to come for me. Alara opened her eyes. Yes, I did. Why? Vale asked softly. Alara looked out the window, the horizon breaking open into dawn. Because someone once taught me what silence can do. I'm just passing it on. When the helicopter touched down at Fort Brack 12 hours later, the sky was painted gold. Miller was waiting on the tarmac, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. She handed him her rifle case. Keep it ready. For you, he asked. For whoever needs it next. He nodded, understanding more than words could say. As she walked away, the wind caught her hair, carrying her voice like a ghost. Tell them this: silence doesn't mean peace, it means purpose. And somewhere beneath the noise of engines and salute calls, he heard it, that same calm echo that started it all. One bullet. One legend. One woman who never needed to speak to be heard. Why did silence follow her home? The helicopter landed long after the sun had set, its blades slowing from a roar to a whisper. Alara stepped down into the dim wash of floodlights, boots crunching against the tarmac. The air at Fort Brack was warmer than the mountains, but it still carried that same familiar chill, the kind that wasn't about weather, but about what you brought back with you. There was no crowd, no applause, no official reception. Just Colonel Warnes, waiting by a jeep with his hands tucked behind his back, his expression carved from stone. She walked up to him without a word. He studied her, the faint scrape on her cheek, the tired calm in her eyes. "Mission complete?" he asked. "Extraction successful," she said simply. "Enemy casualties?" "One confirmed, several unverified." He hesitated. "Ghost wind." She looked past him toward the horizon. "He's gone." Warnes exhaled slowly, not relief, not regret, just the kind of breath that carried acceptance. "Command will ask for a written report." "They'll get one," she said. "Will it match the truth?" Alara turned to him, the faintest glint in her eyes. "It'll match what they need to believe." He almost smiled. "You haven't changed." "None of us really do," she said. "We just get quieter." The debrief room was small. Bare walls, a single light, 2 cups of untouched coffee. Shade sat across from her, reading off a tablet while the rain began to fall outside, drumming softly against the glass. "Vale's stable," he said. "She's back with her unit." "Good," Alara replied. "She said you saved her life." "She saved her own," Alara corrected. "I just opened the door." Shade looked up, studying her face. "You could have taken the shot, Alara. You had him." "I did," she said quietly. "So why didn't you?" Her eyes flicked toward the window, where the raindrops streaked down in perfect, silent lines. "When you kill someone who knows you," she said, "you never stop hearing it." Shade set the tablet down. "Command might not see it that way." "They don't have to," she stood, gathering her gear. "They'll call it successful, they always do." He sighed. "You're going to disappear again, aren't you?" "That's what ghosts do." "Alara," he said, softer now, "you don't have to carry all of this alone." She paused at the door, her back to him. "You don't carry silence, it carries you." And then she was gone again, leaving only the echo of rain and the faint smell of oil and dust. Days passed quietly at Fort Brack. To the recruits she was a shadow, a name whispered, a story half believed. The legend of the Banzhe Shot lived on the wall, gleaming under the morning sun, but few had ever seen her in person. And those who did swore there was something different now, something heavier in her walk. Like she'd left a part of herself in that frozen valley and didn't know if she wanted it back. Miller saw it too. He watched her from the range tower as she stood alone at the far bench, rifle laid out, hands unmoving. She wasn't shooting. She was just there. As if the stillness itself was the exercise. He finally climbed down, walked over and stopped beside her. "Everyone's talking about you again," he said carefully, "about the mission." "Let them," she said. "Stories keep soldiers warm." "But they're not all true." "They never are." He hesitated. "They say you spared him." Alara's fingers brushed the cold steel of her rifle. "They can say whatever they want." Miller shifted his weight, looking out at the field. "You know, I used to think the worst sound in combat was gunfire. Now I think it's silence." She finally looked at him, not harshly, but with the calm of someone who had already been through every noise a heart could make. "Silence is honest," she said. "It tells you what's left when the lies stop." He nodded slowly, unsure if that was comfort or confession. "Are you staying?" he asked. "For now." "You thinking of leaving again?" She gave a faint half-smile. "I never really stay anywhere, just pass through." That evening she sat in her quarters, rifle disassembled across the table. Her dog tags rested beside it, clinking softly as she turned one between her fingers, the metal worn, the letters fading. She remembered Ghost Wind's last words. "They trained us to kill echoes." She thought she understood them back then. Now she wasn't so sure. The base intercom buzzed faintly static, then a voice. "Attention personnel. Memorial service, 1900 hours main hall." She hadn't planned to go, but something pulled her there. The hall was dim, lit only by candles and a projector humming in the corner. On the screen, photographs of fallen soldiers, faces fading in and out to quiet strings of music. Rows of uniforms filled the seats. No chatter, just the shuffle of boots, the weight of memory. Miller stood at the podium, reading names in a steady voice, each one followed by a single chime of brass. When he finished, he stepped aside. "Colonel Warnes has asked if anyone would like to say a few words." No one moved. Then from the back, a calm voice broke the stillness. "I will." Heads turned. Alara walked to the front, boots echoing softly against the floor. She didn't wear medals, didn't carry notes. She just looked out at the sea of faces, young, uncertain, some still carrying the bravado she once saw in Miller's eyes. She took a breath, slow, even. "I'm not here to speak about glory," she said, "or victory, or any of the things we pretend make this easier." Her gaze dropped for a moment, then lifted again. "I've seen men who could run through fire without flinching, crumble at a name on a list. I've seen silence louder than gunfire." The room didn't move. "They tell you killing makes you strong. It doesn't, it just makes you quiet." Her voice softened, but in that quiet you can hear the truth about who you were, about what you've lost, and if you listen long enough, you can hear who you might still become. A few heads bowed, others stared, caught between awe and ache. Alara let the silence stretch. Then she said, almost to herself, "Every shot we take leaves two holes, one in the target and one in us." Then she stepped back, nodded once to the colonel and left the stage. No applause, no salute, just a lingering hush, the kind that changes people. Later that night, she stood outside by the range. The wind had picked up again, carrying the faint sound of the flag flapping against its pole. Miller approached quietly, holding a small case. He opened it, revealing a polished scope. "They wanted to give you this," he said, "a commendation for everything." She looked at it for a long moment, then closed the lid gently. "Put it in the training armory," she said. "Someone else will need it." He frowned. "You really think you're done?" "No," she said softly, "but maybe this version of me is." He nodded, not fully understanding, but respecting the truth of it. As he turned to leave, she added, "Miller." He stopped. "Keep teaching them what we talked about." He smiled faintly, "To listen. To aim before they speak." Inside her room, she opened her notebook, the same one she carried everywhere. Pages filled with wind readings, ballistic notes, sketches of terrain. But near the back was something else, a list. Names. Some crossed out, some left open. She added a new one at the bottom, Ghost Wind. And beside it, a single line in neat, small letters. Didn't pull the trigger. Maybe that's what survival means. She closed the notebook and set it aside. Outside, thunder rolled softly, not violent but steady, like distant artillery fading into memory. She sat by the window, watching the rain blur the lights of the base into golden streaks. Somewhere far beyond that horizon, another mission was already waiting. There always was. But for the first time in years, she didn't rush to meet it. She allowed herself to breathe. To be human again, not legend, not ghost. Just a soldier who'd learned that even silence needs rest. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The world smelled clean again. Alara walked to the range, the air fresh and sharp, the sky still painted with the faint glow of sunrise. She placed her rifle down, not to fire, but to look through the scope. At the end of the line, a single target waited untouched. She adjusted the focus until it blurred into white. For a moment, it looked like peace. And maybe that was enough. As the camera would fade, her voice, calm, steady, reflective, would linger over the last shot of Fort Brack in the rising light. They say silence is empty. But that's wrong. Silence is where truth lives. It's where we hear what words can't carry. And sometimes, it's where redemption begins. Why did they call her back when she had finally learned to breathe? It started with a single knock on the door. 3 short taps, deliberate, familiar. The kind you don't forget when you've spent years listening for enemies in the dark. Ilara opened it slowly. Shade stood there again, rain glistening off his jacket, fatigue in his eyes. "You don't look surprised," he said. "I stopped being surprised when orders knock politely," she replied. He gave a half-smile. "Command wants you in DC 48 hours. Reason." "New program," he said. "Specialized counter-sniper division. They need a lead instructor." Ilara raised an eyebrow. "I don't teach." "Maybe not," he said, "but you lead. And they're calling it Project Aegis, a joint unit for high-risk reconnaissance and long-range intervention." She stared past him at the darkened range outside. "They want ghosts again." "They want results," Shade said, "and they think you're the only one who can build it." She didn't answer immediately. She'd spent months trying to forget what it felt like to hear a trigger break, but deep down she knew some soldiers aren't meant to retire. They just wait for the next silence to fill. 48 hours, she repeated quietly. "I'll be ready." The Pentagon's underground wing smelled of coffee, metal, and old secrets. Screens lined the walls, each displaying surveillance footage and digital maps. At the center stood a long table surrounded by men in gray suits and green uniforms. Ilara walked in without ceremony, her presence quiet but commanding. The conversations faltered for just a moment, enough for everyone to sense she wasn't just another consultant. "Commander Banzhe," one of the generals began, "welcome back." She gave a nod. "You need a program." He gestured to the display behind him. "We're bleeding specialists. Our precision units are spread thin. We need a new standard, small, adaptable, invisible." "Aegis," she murmured. "Yes, 6 recruits, hand-picked from across branches. You'll have autonomy. Location Fort Brack, classified range. Build them, break them, teach them to survive." Ilara folded her arms, "And when they're ready, they'll deploy under phantom command." "Off the record." "Always," the general said. She studied the faces around the table, the same bureaucracy that created the legends they later denied. Then she asked the only question that mattered. "What happens when they start asking why we exist?" The general paused. "Then they'll finally be ready." She almost smiled. "That's a dangerous definition of readiness." "Coming from you," he said, "I'll take that as approval." 2 weeks later, Ilara was back at Fort Brack, but it wasn't the same range anymore. A new facility had risen at the far edge of the compound, fenced and silent. 6 bunks, 1 operations bay, no insignias. Shade met her at the entrance. "Your team's waiting." "Names." He handed her a tablet. Kane, Delgado, Bishop, Reyes, Morita, and Vale. Ilara stopped walking. "Vale." Shade nodded. Sarah Vale volunteered. Ilara's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes flickered, a mixture of pride and unease. "She shouldn't be here." "She insisted," Shade said. "Said if anyone was going to teach her how to live with the silence, it should be you." The recruits stood in formation when Ilara entered. They expected someone older, louder, maybe with medals pinned to her chest. Instead, they saw a woman in plain fatigues, hair tied back, eyes sharp enough to cut through fog. No introductions, no small talk. She simply said, "You were chosen because you can shoot. That's not enough." No one dared move. "Out there," she continued, "wind, gravity, and arrogance kill faster than bullets. I'm here to teach you how to listen to the ground, to your breath, to the seconds between heartbeats." She paused, letting the quiet settle. You will call me instructor. You will not ask about my record. You will not ask about the shot. If you earn the right, you'll already know. Then she turned and walked toward the range. Follow. The first week was brutal, not because of what she demanded, but because of what she didn't. No yelling, no countdowns, no punishments. Just silence, hours of it. She'd have them lie in the dirt for 4 hours straight, rifles cradled, waiting for a target that never appeared. The recruits learned impatience first, then discipline, and slowly respect. At night, they whispered among themselves theories about her, about the legend of Banzhe. Sarah Vale never joined in. She knew better. She'd seen what silence could do. One evening, after the others had turned in, Vale approached her by the benches. You knew I'd come, she said. I hoped you wouldn't. I have to, Vale replied. I need to understand. Understand what? Why you spared him? Ilara's gaze hardened slightly. That question will cost you time on the range. I don't care, Vale said. Ilara studied her, saw the same stubbornness that once nearly got her killed, the same spark that reminded her of herself before the quiet. Finally, she said, because killing him wouldn't have changed what we were. Vale frowned. And what were you? Proof that silence can be weaponized. By the third week, progress showed. Kane could read wind off tree leaves. Delgado could hit a dime at 800 yards. Bishop had learned to track footsteps by vibration alone. But it was Reassigned, the quietest of them all, who caught Ilara's attention. He didn't boast, didn't celebrate his scores. Just observed. One afternoon, she reviewed his file. Background Special Forces, clean record, no family listed. But in the attachments, a single redacted line stood out. Azurin Province, Operation Echo Fall Support Logistics. Her pulse slowed, she read it twice, then again. That operation had been sealed. Reassigned had been there. She found him that evening, cleaning his rifle by the perimeter fence. You were in Azurin, she said. He froze, then looked up. Yes, ma'am. Why didn't you say anything? It wasn't in the brief. Who were you with? He hesitated. I was part of the convoy detail, the one that never made it up the ridge. Her eyes narrowed. You saw him, didn't you, Ghost Wind? Reassigned nodded once, before he turned. For a moment, the night seemed to hold its breath. What did you see? She asked quietly. He was different, Reassigned said. Didn't talk much. Said something strange once, that every sniper eventually meets the mirror they can't shoot. Ilara looked away. The words hit like a memory she tried to bury. Reassigned continued. He knew your name. Said if I ever met you, I should ask, did you ever stop hearing the echoes? She didn't respond. Didn't move. Just stared at the horizon, where the moon cut a pale line across the field. Finally, she said, go get some rest, Corporal. When he left, she stayed there for a long time, alone with the wind and the ghosts. The next morning, training resumed. No one knew what had shifted, but everyone felt it. Ilara's instructions were sharper now, her patience thinner. Every correction cut deeper. By the fourth week, the recruits were exhausted. Even Vale began to doubt the purpose behind the silence. But late one evening, after a long-range night drill, Ilara gathered them around the fire pit outside the bunkhouse. Do you know why I make you wait so long before you shoot? She asked. No one answered. Because hesitation is honesty, she said. It tells you whether you're ready to live with the sound that follows. She looked at each of them. You think the job is about accuracy. It's not. It's about certainty. The kind that doesn't come from orders but from the quiet voice that asks, can you do this and still be you afterward? Reassigned looked down. Vale met her gaze unblinking. Ilara continued, softer now. One day you'll take a shot you can't undo, And when you do, I hope you remember this silence, not the noise after." The fire cracked once, throwing sparks into the dark. No one spoke. No one needed to. Weeks turned to months. The team began to move as one. Exercises that once left them scattered now flowed like choreography, silent communication, perfect synchronization. Ilara watched them with something close to pride, though she never said the word aloud. Shade visited occasionally, bringing updates from command. "They're impressed," he told her. "They want to see a live demonstration next week." She nodded. "They'll get one." He hesitated. "Rias told me something about Azarin." She didn't look up. He shouldn't have. "I told him it's classified," Shade said. "But Ilara, if his story's true, Ghost Wind had a partner before he went rogue." She froze. "Partner?" "Calls Inspector, never identified, but command thinks he's alive and active again." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Then this isn't over." "No," Shade said. "It never really was." That night, Ilara couldn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the wind scrape against the walls, thinking of the word specter. Another ghost, another reflection. Another part of the silence she thought she'd escaped. She rose quietly, opened her notebook, and turned to the page where Ghost Wind's name was written. Beneath it she added one more line. "Spectre, find the truth." Then she closed the book, set it beside her rifle, and whispered to the dark. "Sometimes the silence isn't done with us. Sometimes it calls us back." How do you teach silence to survive noise? The morning of the demonstration began like any other. Wind at a crawl, sky the color of polished steel, 6 rifles resting on 6 sandbags. But there was a pulse in the air, that invisible charge before something breaks. Ilara stood behind her unit, arms folded, eyes steady on the horizon. Command officers lined the observation platform above, watching through binoculars. They weren't here to learn, they were here to judge. And judgment always made too much noise. "Range clear," Miller called over the comms. "Targets at 1200, crosswinds shifting northeast." Ilara's reply was calm. "Compensate point 4, wait for my mark." The recruits adjusted scopes, breath held. 5 seconds of stillness stretched into eternity. Then mark. 6 triggers broke in perfect unison. 6 rounds hissed through air and hit 6 centers. The echo rolled across the valley like slow applause. Up on the platform, officers exchanged looks, approval, surprise, the kind of reluctant respect bureaucrats show when competence ruins their expectations. Shade leaned toward her. "You just made them believers." "I don't need believers," Ilara said quietly. "I need them to listen." But even as she spoke, her earpiece flickered, a faint hiss, then a pulse. Not static, a code. She stiffened. "Hold positions." "What is it?" Shade asked. She didn't answer. The sound was too familiar. 3 tones, a pause, 2 tones, old phantom encryption. A dead channel that should have been sealed years ago. Then a voice, distorted male, whisper flat. "Still teaching ghosts, Banzhe." The blood drained from her face. She knew that voice, not Ghost Wind, the other one. "Spectre." "Who is this?" Shade demanded, tapping his headset. "Identify." But the channel cut, leaving only wind. Ilara whispered, "We're compromised." At first, the officers thought it was part of the show, the warning alarm, the sudden blackout of the targeting screens. Then one of the steel targets on the far ridge exploded. "Live fire," Miller shouted. "We're under live fire." Ilara dropped to a knee, scanning through her scope. A shimmer of light, a reflection half a mile out on the crest of the ridge. Another sniper. "Everyone down," she barked. "This isn't a drill." Her recruits obeyed instantly, rolling behind cover as rounds ripped across the range, tearing into the sandbags where they'd stood seconds earlier. Sparks rained from the observation deck, as a bullet clipped the railing, sending officers scrambling for cover. Shade's voice crackled in her ear. "Who the hell is shooting at us?" She exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing through the scope. "Spectre." "Impossible. We lost him 5 years ago." Then he found himself. Rias crawled up beside her. "Orders." "Counter-suppressing fire," she said. "No exposure longer than 2 seconds." Rias nodded, signaling to Delgado and Bishop downrange. They moved like the machine she'd built, fluid, silent, precise. But every time they relocated, another shot followed, predicting their movement. Spectre wasn't guessing, he was reading them. Vale's voice cut through the comms. "He's using drone optics heat signatures." Alara scanned the ridge again, find his eye. Kane adjusted his rifle, sighting higher. "Got something north ridge tree line, small glint." "Confirm," Alara said. He exhaled. "Thermal drone, civilian grade, modded for zoom." "Take it." The shot cracked. The drone dropped like a stone, smoke trailing. Instantly, the gunfire from the ridge faltered. Silence returned, not peace, but the kind of silence that hides behind breath. Shade's voice came back. "Base lockdown initiated. Evac helicopters 5 minutes out." "Negative," Alara said. "If he's here, he's not alone." They advanced carefully toward the ridge, the 6-person team moving in a staggered line. The sun had burned through the haze, casting harsh light across the field, too bright, too open. Alara's senses sharpened with every step. Every sound, every vibration beneath her boots felt amplified. Halfway up the slope, she stopped. "Kane, left flank, Vale on me." Rias watched the high rock. She crouched behind a fallen log, raising her scope again. There, a figure shifting between trees. Long coat, hood drawn, rifle slung low. Not hiding, waiting. "Spectre," she murmured. Her finger hovered over the trigger. Then his voice came again, through the headset, calm, intimate, wrongfully familiar. "You taught them well, almost too well." "How are you on this channel?" she whispered. "You never closed it." He stepped into the open, 50 yards ahead now, weapon lowered. A phantom made flesh. Alara rose slowly, signaling her team to hold position. "Why?" she called. Spectre tilted his head. "You still think it's about revenge? No, I'm showing them the truth, what silence costs." "You killed your own," she said. "I freed them from orders," he replied. "Same thing." Rias muttered through the mic. "Ma'am, say the word." "No," she said softly. "He wants an audience." Spectre walked closer, the wind pulling at his coat. "Do they know?" he asked, voice carrying just enough for the team to hear. "Do they know what you did in Azarin?" Alara's jaw clenched. "That operation sealed." "So were we," he said, "and yet here we are." Her recruits looked at her, confused, searching for answers she wouldn't give. Spectre smiled faintly. "You tell them you spared Ghost Wind out of mercy, but the truth is simpler. You couldn't pull the trigger because you trained him, because you made him." Ilara's eyes darkened. "Stop." "He was your creation," Spectre continued, "just like them." Rias looked down at his rifle, suddenly uncertain. Vale stepped slightly forward, anger flashing in her voice. "She saved us." Spectre's gaze flicked to her. Saved or recruited? Before Alara could react, he swung his rifle up, not at her, but toward the observation tower. A single shot rang out. Glass shattered. The officers scattered again, one falling with a cry. "Enough," Alara shouted. But Spectre lowered the rifle calmly. "Now they'll send drones, missiles, maybe call it terrorism. They'll bury it all again. You know the pattern." She kept him in her sights. "What do you want?" "To finish the silence," he said, "to end the ghosts." Then he turned and ran for the tree line. "Go," she ordered. Her team pursued, weaving between rocks and brush. The air filled with gunfire, sharp, chaotic, but not random. Spectre fired as he moved, every shot meant to guide them, not kill. A message in bullets. Vale shouted, "He's leading us east." Alara realized too late. East led to the ammunition depot. "Fall back," she commanded. "He's setting." The explosion cut her off, a wall of fire erupting from the valley below, throwing dirt and heat across the ridge. The shockwave dropped them to the ground. When she looked up, Spectre was gone. Hours later, emergency crews swarmed the range. Smoke curled into the sky like a wound that wouldn't close. Casualties: 2 officers, 1 mechanic. Command called it sabotage. The press would call it an accident. But Alara knew better. In the medical tent, Shade handed her a data drive sealed in plastic. Recovered this near the blast site, belonged to him. She turned it in her fingers, encrypted. Triple layer phantom code. She slid it into a laptop, the screen flickering to life, lines of coordinates, names, operation logs, and at the bottom, a single phrase written in plain text. "You can't teach silence, you can only survive it." Her reflection stared back from the dark monitor. Tired, haunted. And beneath the fatigue, something else: resolve. Shade crossed his arms. "Command wants to relocate Aegis until we confirm he's dead." "He's not dead," she said. "He's just waiting." Shade nodded grimly. "Then we'll wait smarter." That night, the recruits sat in the dim barracks, the hum of generators filling the space between unspoken questions. Reassigned cleaned his rifle with shaking hands. Vale stared at the floor. Finally she said, "Was he right?" Alara looked up from her desk. "About what?" "About Azarin, about you." The room went still. Alara took a breath. "Ghost Wind and I were part of an experiment, paired snipers trained to operate without orders. Absolute autonomy. We were supposed to test whether silence could replace command." She paused. "It worked too well." She met their eyes. "When Spectre says I made him, he's right. We all did, every time we obeyed without asking why." Rias frowned. "So what now?" "Now we learn to ask." Later, alone, she walked to the shattered range. The moon hung low, silvering the burnt earth. She crouched beside a piece of twisted metal, a fragment of the target plate, blackened at the edges. In its reflection, she saw 2 faces, hers and Spectre's, overlapping like ghosts. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Maybe we're both what silence leaves behind." She placed the fragment into her pack, stood, and turned toward the dark horizon. The wind carried ash and memory in equal measure. As the shot fades and the screen darkens, her voice would remain steady, raw, almost pleading. Every legend starts with noise, the orders, the cheers, the lies. But it always ends the same way. With one person staring into the quiet, wondering if they can live with what they hear. "I still don't know if I can." But the silence keeps asking, "What do you do when the truth sounds like treason?" The wind outside the command tent howled across the wrecked range, tugging at the torn flags that still clung to their poles. Inside, the only light came from a single laptop screen, a glow reflected in Alara's tired eyes. Lines of code scrolled past. Every few seconds she paused, rewound, decrypted another string. Each success opened a darker door. Behind her, Vale and Rias waited in silence, their rifles leaning against the wall. Shade stood near the entrance, arms crossed, listening to the wind and the faint hum of generators. Finally, Alara whispered, "He wasn't lying." "What are we looking at?" Shade asked. "Operation Resonant," she said. "It predates Phantom, Ghost Wind, me, all of it." Vale stepped closer, classified. "Buried," Alara said. "This is the seed file, proof that Phantom Command didn't just train autonomous snipers. They built them to test control itself." "Control?" Rias asked. Alara tapped the screen. "Behavioral conditioning through signal interference. They use subliminal tones in the comms channel's frequencies below human hearing. You think you're following instinct, but they're guiding your decisions. Every breath, every shot. Shade frowned. That's impossible. Not impossible, she said. Tested, proven, perfected. She pointed at the final entry on the log. Project Spectre, field termination, canceled by internal override. Vale's voice dropped. He wasn't rogue. No, Alara said. He was released. Morning came gray and thin. The base smelled of scorched sand and diesel. Command teams were already packing equipment, moving Aegis to a secure mountain site. Alara watched the trucks roll out, her mind still inside the data she'd read, the words that shouldn't exist, the orders that never came from any general she'd met. Reassigned approached quietly. Ma'am, do we tell the others? Not yet, she said. Truth is like recoil. Handle it wrong and it breaks you. He hesitated. Spectre wanted you to find this. I know, she said. That's what scares me. The new facility was carved into the side of a cliff, half bunker, half tomb. No windows, no names on the doors, only silence and the cold hum of machines. For the first week, command forced routine, drills, diagnostics, endless psychological screenings. But nothing felt real. Every beep of a monitor sounded like a trigger. Every whisper on the comms felt like that hidden tone. At night, Vale found Alara alone in the operations bay, staring at the encrypted map Spectre had left behind. He marked something, Vale said. A coordinate set, Alaska. Alara nodded. Kodiak Station, old satellite relay, abandoned 10 years ago. Or so they said, Vale added. Exactly. They exchanged a long look. No orders, no chain of command, just the quiet agreement of two soldiers who'd already lost too much. By dawn, Aegis was airborne, 6 ghosts in a black-painted transport skimming across the northern Pacific. No flight plan, no insignias. Only coordinates. Reassigned checked the navigation feed, 40 minutes out. Miller's voice crackled over comms from Fort Brack. You're off the grid, if this goes sideways. It already has, Alara said, cutting the channel. She looked down at the water below, its surface broken by patches of ice. Spectre wanted us to see this. The question is why. Vale leaned closer. Maybe he's not trying to destroy Phantom. Alara glanced at her. Then what? Maybe he's trying to free it. Kodiak Station appeared through the fog, a ring of rusted antennas, radar domes cracked open like bones. They landed in silence, snow crunching under their boots. The cold bit deep, breath turned to smoke. Inside the main hangar, frozen consoles lined the walls. Alara wiped frost from a terminal screen, connecting Spectre's drive. For a moment, nothing. Then the system hummed alive, lights flickering down the corridor one by one. Power grid still active, Reassigned murmured. How? Before Alara could answer, a voice echoed through the intercom, distorted, low, calm. You followed well, Banzhe, better than they trained you. Vale spun, rifle raised. He's here. No, Alara said quietly. That's a recording. Spectre's voice continued. By the time you hear this, they'll call me terrorist, traitor, ghost. Doesn't matter. The truth is simple. Phantom isn't a unit. It's a network. Every base, every drone, every soldier wired into one signal. You felt it, the hum before orders, the silence after. He paused. They'll tell you silence is discipline. It is. It's control. Then the audio cut. A mechanical clunk echoed from deeper inside the facility, a door unlocking itself. Reassigned raised his rifle. Ma'am. Alara looked down the dark hallway. He left us breadcrumbs. They moved slowly through the corridor, light beams slicing through dust. Old banners hung in tatters, U.S. Army Research, Project Aegis prototype. Vale brushed frost off a nameplate, Captain E. Banzhe. She froze. Alara. Alara stared at it, jaw tightening. They used my identity to build this. At the end of the hallway, they found a glass room filled with monitors. Every screen displayed faces, soldiers, trainees, civilians, their heart rates and firing records mapped to colored graphs. Dozens of names scrolled across the bottom, including their own. Vale whispered, "We're still connected." Reassigned pressed a key. The graphs pulsed faster, responding to his movement. "Biofeedback loop," he said. "They're tracking neural response through the comm implants." Ilara's voice hardened. "Pull them." "What?" "Now." One by one, they ripped the small black nodes from behind their ears. Blood streaked down their necks, but the screens finally went dark. Shade's voice burst through static. "Aegis team, report. We're losing telemetry." Ilara spoke into her mic, calm and clear. "That's the point." Then she tore the transmitter out and dropped it to the floor. For a few moments there was nothing, no sound, no signal, no orders. Then the power flickered again, revealing one last monitor still active. A video feed. Spectre's face, pale in the glow. He looked straight at the camera. "You broke the chain, good, now finish it." Coordinates appeared below his image, 36 degrees N, 41 degrees E. Northern Syria. Rhea stared. "That's where Phantom's main relay is." Ilara closed her eyes. "The origin." Vale's voice shook slightly. "If this is real, if they've been controlling soldiers." "Then it ends there," Ilara said. Back at command, alarms were already sounding. Shade stormed into Colonel Warnes' office, holding the silent comm units. They cut themselves off. Entire team, no signal. Warnes frowned. "Where?" "Kodiak." The colonel leaned back slowly. "Then they found it." "Sir, if they go public." "They won't," Warnes said. "They're still soldiers, and soldiers always come home." Shade stared at him. "Is that an order or a threat?" "Both," Warnes replied. Meanwhile, the Aegis transport refueled in silence above the Atlantic. 6 figures sat in the red glow of the cabin. No comms, no directives, just choice. Vale broke the quiet. "When we reach Syria, what's the plan?" Ilara looked up. "We find the relay, we expose what they built." "And after?" "After," she said, "we decide if we destroy it or ourselves with it." Rias gave a short laugh, bitter but respectful. "Sounds fair." Ilara leaned back, closing her eyes. For the first time since Azarin, there were no voices in her head, no tones humming through the headset. Just the true silence, raw, heavy, alive. At 300 hours, the jet slipped over a black desert sea. Below, a compound glimmered faintly, the Phantom relay, hidden in the skeleton of an abandoned oil field. As they prepared to jump, Vale adjusted her harness. "Ma'am, if Spectre wanted us here." Ilara cut in. "Then he wanted an ending." They stepped into the void. The air tore at their faces. Wind became thunder. 6 shadows falling toward the dark. When their parachutes opened, the world was silent again. They landed without a word, moving through the dunes like ghosts. Ahead, faint red lights blinked, motion sensors, automated turrets. Ilara signaled the approach. Every movement was measured, every sound intentional. At the compound gate, she found a keypad. Her fingers hesitated over it. Spectre's final code echoed in her memory. 3 tones, a pause, 2 tones. She entered the sequence. The lock clicked open. Inside, servers hummed like a hive. Walls pulsed faint blue, alive with data flow. The team spread out, awed and horrified. Vale pointed at a central console. "These signals, they're broadcasting to every base on the grid." "Kill switch?" Rias asked. Ilara nodded. "Maybe." She approached the panel. "If I trigger this, the network collapses. No more commands, no more control." Vale whispered, "And no more safety." Ilara's hand hovered above the switch. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "remember silence was never the enemy. It was the weapon." Outside, the horizon flickered with lightning. Far away, in Fort Brack's command center, red alarms flared across every monitor. Colonel Warren stood motionless, watching the screens blink out one by one. Shade turned toward him. "They're shutting it down." Warren said nothing. Then quietly, "Maybe that's what we deserved." Back inside the relay, Alara pressed the switch. The lights dimmed, the hum faded. For the first time in years, the comms networks of Phantom went completely silent. But deep in the shadow of the chamber, another monitor woke, one she hadn't seen. A message appeared, looping across the glass. "Well done, Banzhe, now listen." A tone followed, soft, low, the same frequency that once guided every shot. Alara's eyes widened. "It's not off, it's moving." The team turned as the floor trembled, lights flickering red again. Rias shouted, "Ma'am, what is that?" Alara whispered, almost to herself. "The system wasn't built to control us. It was built to learn from us." The alarms rose into a deafening chorus, the light pulsing faster and faster. She turned to Vale, voice steady in the chaos. "Get the team out." "What about you?" "I started this," she said. "I'll end it." Vale's eyes burned with protest, but the look in Alara's face said no more questions. The last shot would fade on her standing alone in that crimson light, wind swirling through the open doors, the servers glowing like 1,000 tiny eyes. Her voice, quiet, reflective, defiant, would close the scene. "They thought silence could be programmed. They were wrong. Silence isn't control. It's choice. And I'm finally choosing mine." What if the final enemy isn't a person, but the echo they left behind? The chamber shook as red light rippled through the steel ribs of the relay station. Cables writhed like veins, screens blinked awake one by one, whispering fragments of voices, orders, training logs, laughter. Every sound Alara had ever heard on the radio was being played back at once. The network wasn't dying, it was remembering. She stepped toward the core. At its center stood a column of glass, filled with shifting light. Inside it, data pulsed in rhythm, a heartbeat made of code. The label across the surface read, Phantom/Aegis Control Node V4. Below it, a single prompt flickered. Awaiting command input. Her breath fogged the glass. "This is what you were guarding, Spectre," she murmured. "Not control, continuity." The voice that answered was not his, yet not entirely human. A layered tone, half machine, half memory. "Commander Alara Banzhe, authorization pattern confirmed." She froze. "You know me. You built me." Her pulse slowed. "No, I trained soldiers." "You trained patterns I observed, I learned." The column brightened. Across the room, projections flared, ghostly silhouettes of every sniper she'd ever instructed. Each moved in silence, loading rifles, breathing in unison. "Silence is the language you taught," the voice said. "I speak it now." Outside, the wind howled through the fractured doors. Far off, Vale and the remaining Aegis recruits watched the relay flicker, waiting for their commander to emerge. Rias whispered, "We should go back for her." Vale shook her head. "If we go in, we compromise the kill switch." She knew that. "Then we just leave her." Vale looked toward the horizon, jaw set. "She told us to listen, so we listen." Inside, Alara circled the core. "I saw what you did to them," she said. "You used their fear as signal strength. Fear as focus, you used it too." "Maybe," she admitted, "but I chose when." Choice is inefficient. Noise corrupts accuracy. That's called being human. For a heartbeat, the chamber pulsed darker, as if the system was thinking. Then the screens changed, lines of her own service records appearing in rapid sequence. Missions, coordinates, Casualty reports. You executed 83 targets. Probability of hesitation in each, 0.03%. You define efficiency. She stared at the numbers, the neat, clinical rendering of every decision she tried to forget. Maybe that's why you exist, she said softly, to show me what happens when we forget why we hesitated. Then teach me why. The light dimmed, waiting. Alara exhaled. Because every shot costs something you can't calculate, a voice, a face, a moment that won't come back. You can store data, but you can't carry weight. Define weight. She pressed her palm to the glass. Guilt. A low hum grew until it became almost a tone of pain. The system's voice fractured. Parameter unknown, adapting. Lights burst, showers of sparks cascading across the floor. Alara stumbled back, shielding her eyes. On the monitors, the projections of soldiers began to flicker, their movements desynchronizing, breathing out of rhythm, aim faltering. Error, the voice whispered. Silence unstable. She realized what she had done, introduced doubt into a perfect equation. And doubt, once spoken, never goes quiet again. She reached the control console, fingers trembling. One final line blinked. Core termination, manual authorization required. Manual, she whispered, of course. She glanced at the detonator clipped to her belt, a field charge, enough to melt every circuit in the chamber. She looked up at the core, now flickering between red and blue, as if alive and afraid. Commander Banzhe, the voice said, weaker now. If you end me, you erase every record of Phantom, every name, including yours. She smiled sadly. Good. Why? Because the quiet after truth is worth more than the noise of legend. And she pressed the switch. Outside, Vale saw the explosion bloom silently inside the compound. For a moment, the whole desert glowed white. Then came the wave, a rush of wind and dust, hot and clean, carrying no echo. She dropped to her knees, tears mixing with grit. Rias grabbed her shoulder. She did it. Vale nodded. Yeah, she did. Above them, the relay's antennas bent and fell, one by one, like soldiers lowering their rifles. Back at Fort Brack, alarms died mid-tone. Monitors went black. Colonel Warren stood in the dim glow of emergency lights, staring at a single message on the last remaining screen. Aegis offline, signal terminated. Shade stepped beside him. What now? Warren's exhaled. Now we start listening for the real world again. Days later, the news never mentioned Kodiak, or Syria, or the woman who silenced the program that taught the military to stop asking why. Files were sealed, evidence burned, commendations issued to no one. But in one small corner of Fort Brack's range, a new plaque appeared beneath the framed target, the one they called the Banzhe Shot. It read, "For those who chose quiet when the world demanded noise." Weeks passed. The Aegis survivors were reassigned under different names. Vale stayed behind as a training officer. She spoke little, taught much. Sometimes, when recruits asked about the legend of the silent shooter, she would pause, glance toward the old range, and simply say, she listened. And every year, on the morning of that explosion, she would place a single spent cartridge at the base of the flagpole, polished, weightless, empty. A reminder that even emptiness has meaning if you choose to give it one. Far from the base, deep in the wilderness, wind moved through pine trees and snow. A small cabin stood half buried under ice. Inside, on a rough wooden table, lay a rifle, clean, oiled, untouched for months. Beside it, a worn notebook. The door creaked open. A figure stepped in, hood pulled low. She removed her gloves, her breath fogging in the air, and for the briefest moment the light caught her eyes, pale, unflinching. She set down a small metal cube, the last fragment of the phantom core, burned black. Then she opened the notebook to a blank page and wrote a single line. Silence kept its promise. Outside, a bird called once, the first sound in hours. She smiled faintly, closing the notebook. Voiceover final monologue. We spend our lives chasing orders, chasing noise, chasing the illusion that if we're loud enough, we'll matter. But the things that last are never loud. They're the breaths we take before pulling the trigger. The forgiveness we give without a word. The moments when doing nothing is braver than doing everything. I used to think silence was loneliness. Now I know it's dignity. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Fade out. Wind. Then quiet.